Hi friends, it's Bethany. Welcome back. In this video, this has been a very highly requested video for probably a year and a half now, and I am finally sitting down to record it for you. I'm sorry it's taken so long. It's just I've had so many things to do that I have had to put this on the back burner, but it is front and center for me right now, and we are going to go through all of the things that you may consider purchasing as a beginner card maker. I'm going to break this up a little bit. I'm going to go through all of the things that I think are your must-haves, but then I'm going to add a few things at the end that if you want to take it a step further, other things that I would recommend. So the first things that we're going to go through are the must-haves that I think are super important when you're starting out your journey with card making. And then if you want to do a little bit more, I'll add a couple other ideas on how you can expand upon your collection or your supplies. Then at the very end, I'm going to make a card for you. And the reason I want to put a card at the end of this video is so that you can see some of these must-haves in action if you haven't watched the card making process. So if you are just starting out with card making, or if you're already a card maker and you're wanting to get some other ideas for other things that you can add to your craft room, then continue watching. Now, if you have any other ideas of fun things that you think are must-haves for card makers and especially beginner card makers, please be sure to pop down into the comment section and let me know. And as always, everything that I'm showing you today will be linked down below in the description box. If you're ready to go and learn about all the fun things that you may want to have when starting card making, go ahead and give this a thumbs up and let's get started. Okay, the first thing that is an absolute must-have for a card maker, it's completely appropriate to start here, is a die cutting machine. Now, if you're not sure what a die is, here is a stamp set. These are all of the little stamps that you would stamp out, color, or do what you wish with. But then there are, coordinating dies. And these are metal dies that you will put around your little stamp, send it through the machine, and it will cut out your little either ducky, bathtub, anything that the metal die is for. Okay, so that is what it does. It also does other things like embossing folders and things like that. So super fun. Now, there are many things that you want to think about when doing a die cutting machine. First of all, you want to decide how you want it to work. So this particular machine, this is a Gemini Junior. This is electronic, which means that once you send the plate through, it goes automatically. You're not having to use a lever or a crank to push it through manually. Instead, it's electronic. So this is the Spellbinders Platinum 6. This is something that you would crank through, and for lack of a better word, crank, but you're going to roll it through and manually do it. There's no electronic pieces of this machine. You'll just open the little front and the back, and then you will send your, let me find the coordinating plates for this machine, but you would send your plates through, and not just one plate, but you have a whole plate sandwich for this. Okay, this is the same, but on a smaller level or scale as the Platinum 6. So this is also a manual machine. This is a little mini machine. I have all of the heart eyes for this machine because it's so tiny, and I feel like when I'm doing projects like this, I really am using small pieces of paper. So this is a great machine if you're just starting out and you know your projects are going to be really small. But if you know you want to use embossing folders and things that are bigger, then I would opt for a bigger machine. You just have to decide what's going to work best for you and your craft process. So it's not really something that anyone can tell you to do. You can't really have someone say this machine is better for you than this one, because it depends on how you want to craft. Do you want to have something that's a little bit easier where it just runs right through? Do you want to be able to just manually do it if that doesn't bother you? Or do you think that you're going to craft on a smaller scale? So I equally love all of these machines dearly, but another thing before we move on that you want to think about is the size of projects you're going to do. And I just kind of barely touched on that. So I want to show you the cutting plates here. So these are pretty much equal. But then we have much smaller scale for our little mini down here. Okay, so again, think through the size of your projects if you're going to need something that's a little bigger, or if you're okay with something a little smaller. To be fair, the first die cutting machine that I purchased was the Spellbinder. I had to think about it. The Spellbinder Platinum 6 was the first machine I purchased. Then I fell in love with the idea of having something electronic because sometimes it's nice, especially if you're working on a lot of projects. The electronic version is super nice as well. And then the last one I purchased was the Mini, again, because after going through a couple machines, I realized that I am working on a smaller scale and I can appreciate just a tinier machine for just giving me more room on my craft space. That way I have a tiny machine and more room to craft. So it's up to you, but this is the first must-have that you are going to need as a card maker, a die cutting machine. Next up, you are going to need some cardstock. I recommend having an 80-pound cardstock for your card panels and then going a little bit heavier for your card bases with 110-pound cardstock. I'll link the exact cardstock that I like to use. I've been using this since the very beginning and there's no reason for me to switch because this is just stellar cardstock. Okay, so again, 80-pound and then also 110-pound, but also you're going to want some colored cardstock as well. So here is the colored cardstock that I really like. It's great to either use for your front panel or for your card base as well, but it's always nice to have some color options as well. So I'll link my favorite company for color cardstock. Their colors are just delicious. You'll love them and they coordinate so well together. This is only one of my little bins. These are my warmer tones and then I have some cooler tones and so forth. Okay, so cardstock is the next thing you are definitely going to want to invest in as a card maker. Another thing that you may want to consider when you are starting out with card making is some coloring utensils because, as I mentioned, with stamps, you may want to color them in. So there's multiple things that you might want to consider investing in. These are really fun tri-blend markers. They have 3 markers in one, which is really nice for blending because you have your dark, your mid-tone, and then your lighter tone. So those are super, super fun and really exciting to play with. You could also invest in an alcohol marker that is a Copic marker. These are really fun as well and what I prefer to use. I also have, when I started out with Ohuhu markers. They're a little bit more cost effective and so I started out with them just to kind of get a feel for the coloring and if it was something I even was going to really want to run down a rabbit hole with. And so this is a good kind of entry level starter set that's really nice and I'll link everything down below. If you're not really into the whole marker thing, you could also think about investing in some colored pencils. And I have mine wrapped in this little pouch here, but colored pencils are another really, really wonderful way to bring some color to your stamps after you stamp them out. So again, as a beginner card maker, you might want to think about what to do after you stamp out your image, how you want to bring some color to them. I really love coloring with alcohol markers, but if you're not quite there yet, then maybe consider some colored pencils. Those are really fun as well. I have found that coloring is one of the most relaxing parts of card making, and you may find that another part of card making is more relaxing to you. You'll learn as you are starting your journey with card making, but I have found that coloring is a wonderful way to get really artistic, but also to just settle down and relax your mind. While this may sound silly, a tape dispenser with some washi tape would be a great idea if you are starting out with card making. I use washi tape for just about everything in every part of my card making process, especially when I go to tape down my dies, which you'll see at the end of this video. When you tape down your dies around your stamped image, you want to have a very low tack tape to secure your dies so that once you remove the tape, you're not ripping your paper. I also use this to secure my paper to my card mat or my craft mat when I'm working. I find I use this for just about everything. It's wonderful. I also really, really like this particular tape dispenser because it's heavy. And what's great about that is that you can go ahead and grab tape fairly easily without it sliding all over the mat. It's just wonderful, wonderful to work with. Another item to consider when you are beginning your journey with card making are inks. So for colored inks, I love Concord and Ninth inks. It's the same company that I recommended the cardstock with. Their colored cardstock is delicious. once again. And they have the same coordinating colors for their ink pads. The colors are wonderful. They just match beautifully with one another. They coordinate well, and I just love their ink pads. They're very high quality, very wonderful to work with. Now, for a black ink, I really recommend you just have a basic black ink for stamping out your images, but also for doing your sentiments. This is a really nice ink. One thing that is really beneficial about this particular ink is that it's really great for using alcohol markers with. So if you don't use the appropriate inks with alcohol markers, then once you stamp out your image and start coloring, the black line will start to smudge and that ink will smudge. But this plays really, really well with the alcohol markers. So if you use this when you're stamping out your image and then continue on to color with alcohol markers, you are good to go. Just give it a tad bit of time to dry, especially if you double stamp it, and you'll be perfectly fine. One of the most wonderful things in the world of stamping is a stamp positioner tool. I have two sizes. I have a mini and a larger stamping tool, and I absolutely adore these. These make stamping so easy, and I honestly don't know how Cardmakers did it before this was invented. I'll show you in a little bit how to use these, but basically what you are going to do is take a piece of cardstock. You are going to place it within your little positioner here. And then you're going to take your stamps, peel them off, place them on the door. And by placing them on the door, you are guaranteeing that that stamp stays in the exact same position every time you stamp it. Before we did this, they were just using blocks and you had to stamp it with a block. But if you had any error, you had to try to, which is, in my opinion, virtually impossible. I don't know how they did it, but they had to align it just perfectly to add more ink, which to me is almost virtually impossible. So I am in love with the idea of a stamp positioner tool, and I'm very grateful that I started my card making journey after this was invented, because it is probably one of the most important things and one of the biggest ways that you can enjoy card making and not get frustrated. Okay, so again, there are two sizes. You'll see this in use later. Again, that's why I wanted to go through an entire card at the end of this video so you can see some of these goodies in action. Another item that is a must-have is a wand for your embellishments. So this is a wonderful item for using to add a little fun little flair to the end of your card, just adding a little something to the end. But what this is, it's a little wand. It has a little wax tip on it. Sometimes they have a pokey tool at the end so that you can help kind of nudge your embellishments into position. This one is just has the one end to it, but what it is you use this wax tip to easily pick up some of your embellishments, and it kind of just grips it so that you're not having to grab it with your fingers. You can easily attach it, and then with your card you'll have a little piece of glue there and you can just attach it right down. So this is wonderful, especially when you're working with little intricate things. It just, again, makes the card making process much more fun and much more enjoyable when you have fun tools like this. Speaking of glue dots, one thing that you are going to find makes card making so much easier is having a little liquid glue that is in a precision tip bottle. This precision tip is so nice. Let me see if I can find something that is colorful to put this down on, but you can, with this precision tip, just add teeny tiny little dots. It's so nice, it's so precise, and it makes gluing so much easier, especially when you're working with smaller stamp sets. Again, I'm just gonna continuously bring this in, but if you wanna glue some of these things down, you're gonna need something a little bit more fine and intricate to apply your glue. This is also wonderful because, again, when I was showing you those embellishments, you can add just tiny little dots of glue to add your little sequins, and this works great. You wanna be mindful to add a little pin to the top so that it doesn't dry out, but I'll link the bottles, but I'll also link my favorite liquid glue inside for card making. It's the best. I'm never gonna steer away from it. It's just wonderful. While we're in the world of adhesives, foam squares are a wonderful way to add dimension to your card. These are wonderful because they come in two sizes. We have a little bit of a bigger square, and we also have smaller squares based on what you are trying to achieve. Sometimes you're going to need something a little bit smaller, especially when you have smaller little die cuts like the little bubbles or the ducky, but then you have some bigger ones for some of your bigger little stamped images. These are absolutely wonderful. I purchased these immediately after I started card making, and this is the only brand that I've used. And again, I'm never gonna go away from it because they just work like a charm. Okay, while we are talking about the foam adhesive though, I want to talk about a really good pair of scissors. You're going to want a non-stick scissor when you are working with sticky adhesives like this. That way it doesn't become a mess. So when you are working with adhesives, sometimes you're going to want to trim them down. So you can just cut them down, but if you notice, the sticky adhesive is not sticking and making the little pieces of your scissors all gummy and icky. So investing in just a little pair of non-stick scissors is going to help you stay excited about card making because you're not going to have to repeatedly clean off your scissors, and it's awful when they get sticky because they just don't function as well. So I'll link these down below. They're wonderful and they work super well. I was supposed to mention the foam tape as well when I was talking about foam adhesive. These are great again for the little die cuts, but I like using a foam tape when I am attaching a panel to a card, which you'll see later in the video. And once more, this is where the importance of a non-stick scissor comes in because this is extremely sticky, but if you use these scissors, you're not going to have any issues. There are a couple brands I have found that I really like. I just started using this brand by Altenew that I think is really great. I also highly recommend the 3M foam tape, so I'll link both down below. Both I find have been really great. The 3M is a little bit thicker in width, but it's also thicker foam tape as well. So this is a little bit on the thin side, but the 3M is a little bit thicker, so you'll get even more dimension. Embellishments are another fun thing that you may want to invest in as a card maker, especially when you're starting out. They're a nice way to add a fun final touch to your card. My two favorites are this dewdrop embellishment. This looks like kind of water droplets. I think it's just really fun. It's like a kind of glass bead look. They dry clear. They're wonderful because they add a little something to your card without completely being a distraction. So they're very, very nice, especially for a beginner. Another thing that I like are a nice gold disc. These are really fun to work with as well. They add a fun shine to your card at the very end, and they're super easy to work with. So don't go all in and buy a million different little things of sequins or embellishments, but if you wanted to invest in a couple, I'd highly recommend the dewdrops and then a gold disc. Wire snips also come in handy when you are working with dies, so I highly recommend these wire snips. When you get a new die set, most die sets come connected, so you'll see that they have little connections here. And so an easy way to get them detached from one another is using these wire snips. They work really, really great, and I highly recommend picking up some. It just makes disconnecting all of these little dies quick and easy. Okay, when you're working with cards, remember you are working on a tiny little canvas, which means the things that you're working with are even tinier. I would definitely invest in a little pair of tweezers. These make picking up little die cuts and placing them on your card super, super easy. It also helps because instead of having your fingers all up in the card, you can take your little piece of paper, you can kind of remove your fingers from the situation as you are doing placement. You'll see me demonstrate these a little bit later and show you why I think it's a little bit better to have tweezers, or actually a lot better to have tweezers than to fumble with your fingers. Again, some of these things are just ways that you can have a more enjoyable card making experience. I find that if you are frustrated when you're card making, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? It's not fun to be frustrated when you're creating. So some of these things just help maintain the peace while you are working on your tiny little creation. A paper trimmer is an absolute must-have as a card maker. I have two different sizes. First, I have a larger paper trimmer, and I find that this is absolutely necessary for creating your card bases because they are much longer and bigger. I also have the mini, and I like to use these when I'm doing smaller cuts, and I actually use this quite a bit more than my bigger one, but I also think that I couldn't live without my bigger one because that's how I create all of my card bases. So I'll show you how to use each of these as I am working on my card later, but it is nice to have both sizes. If you are starting out, I'd recommend just going bigger because you're working with 8.5 by 11 cardstock most of the time. And so it's a little bit easier, obviously, to maneuver that in a bigger trimmer. So highly recommend both of these trimmers. They have never steered me wrong. I've gone through a couple trimmers that I haven't really liked, so I find that these have never disappointed me. I'll link them below. You will love them too. Okay, this is the last item that is a complete must-have before we move on to other things that you may want to consider. This is a scoreboard. This is very important for card making because it helps you score your line on your card so that you can fold it in half when you're creating your card base. Again, I'll show you how to use this in just a little bit, but this is a wonderful scoreboard. I have had a couple and I find that I use this all of the time because it's just so easy to use. You have your little folder up here or your scoring tool. I love that it comes out and in very easily up here, but I also love that it has a little area to keep it because I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes things in my happy little craft room get lost very easily when I am working on a lot of things. So having everything attached to one another is definitely beneficial. Okay, I have a couple items now that I want to talk about that are not necessarily a must-have when you're starting, but something that I would consider as a next step. The first thing is a craft mat. This is actually a glass craft mat. I adore it. It has been very, very fun to use because it's very nice that it's magnetic. I can go ahead and magnetize my projects down so that they aren't moving when I'm working on them. I can also use washi tape just to attach my projects down right onto my mat. Another great benefit to the glass mat is that when doing painting projects, I can just put inks right down on my mat. I can get this all messy and then I can simply wipe it away and it is brand new again. I'll link this mat down below. Again, it has been such a game changer for me with card making because sometimes card making can get kind of messy based on the medium that you're doing. I love this. It comes in a couple colors and I highly recommend. Another thing you may want to consider as a next step for card making would be blender brushes. So I have a set of blender brushes. They're both the same brand set, but they're in different little holders. I wanted to bring in this holder because this is something that I just purchased off Amazon and I actually like it better than this blender brush holder. This, while really pretty and very aesthetically pleasing, I just don't like it as much. I find that this is a little bit more sturdy to use. So I'll link both of the holders down below, but a blender brush is a really fun way to use your ink pad. So you can rub this on your ink pad, create some really fun blends on your cardstock. This allows you to also work with coordinating stencils if your die set and stamp set has that as well. So not something that you need to get immediately, but I would definitely recommend getting a blender brush set as a next step in order to be able to work with more products such as stencils, but also to be able to use your inks in different ways. A stamp press tool is another fun little gadget that you may want to consider investing in, and this helps to work with your stamp positioner. So once you get your paper and your stamp inside, once again, I will demonstrate how to use this in a bit, but once you get all of your elements placed inside, press down, then you can use this to really press down your stamp. This helps if you don't want to, press your stamp down in this manner. Maybe you feel a little bit stronger doing something like this or find that you get a better impression. I find that I actually just press down on mine, but for certain stamp sets, it's nice to have this as a backup. As you begin to have fun with card making, you may want to try a new technique, and that technique is heat embossing. There are so many different techniques, but heat embossing is really fun and I find it super beginner friendly. So things that you'll need for heat embossing is a ink pad of Versamark. Okay, this is kind of, I call it like a glue pad. So you're going to need that, and this works with any stamps. You'll also need some embossing powder, and you can get embossing powder in just about any color. I mainly use gold and white and sometimes clear. And then you're also going to need some anti-static powder. This just helps to neutralize the paper that you are placing your powder on so that the only place the powder sticks is on the ink and it doesn't stick to the static that may be on the paper. I know that seems really complicated, but I'll link a video down below where I am doing heat embossing. I'm not going to use this today because the card I'm doing is not going to have heat embossing, but I'll link a video for you so that you can see the whole process from start to finish. And then you're going to need a heat tool to melt your powder. Okay, so neutralize your paper with some anti-static powder tool. Then you're going to glue up your stamp. You're going to put the embossing powder over it, and then you're going to melt it with your heat tool. By this point in the video, you are catching on that card making is a work of love, and it takes a lot of heart, and you're pouring a lot of heart into a tiny little card. So the last thing that I would recommend you finally invest in a little down the road is a handmade stamp for stamping the back of your cards. I ended up doing this probably a year into my card making, just because after seeing all of the work and heart that it takes to create a card, I really wanted to put my little stamp on the back to just show people that I did create this for them. So I'll link a fun Etsy shop down below where you can purchase a little handmade stamp. They're super fun and a great finishing touch to your card. Okay, are you going cross-eyed? Is this making you nervous? If so, stay tuned. We're going to use most of these items, and let's create a card so you can see some of these things in action. Okay, so we are going to bring out the stamp positioner tool, and as I mentioned, I like to use 80-pound cardstock for my card panel, or for using my stamped images or stamping out my images. Okay, so I'm going to use this little magnet to secure my little panel inside the card. This helps so it doesn't move. And again, the benefit of this whole system is that everything stays in its exact spot while you are stamping. All right, I've been showing this stamp set off the entire video, so let's go ahead and have some fun with it. All right, I am going to, let's see, I know I want to stamp out the tub. So what I like to do is I like to place my little stamped images over here, or my little stamps over here. I'm going to do a Father's Day card. So I'm going to call this Daddy Duck. And you want to leave enough room because, again, we are going to do the coordinating dies later. Okay, I'm also going to do 3 little ducklings because we have 3 little kiddos. Okay. And I'm going to add the bubbles. And I think that will probably be it. Yeah, I think that's going to be it. So I'm going to go ahead and put these to the side. Now there's so many stamp sets that you can purchase. In a recent video, I did a haul of fun items that I've purchased and fun stamp sets, so you can check that out if you want some inspiration. Now, when you first get a brand new stamp set, you want to kind of rub your finger over, and what this does is it removes a coating that is present on the stamp from when it was created. And if you remove that coating, it just helps the ink kind of stick down better. And again, later I'm going to use alcohol markers. So I'm going to go in with this Memento ink because it plays really, really well with the alcohol markers. I'm going to zoom in here so we can really appreciate what's going on. So once I place this ink down, because I conditioned the stamp, it tends to sit better on the stamp itself and not kind of pool up. Okay, so that looks good. Now, more often than not, I would say 99.9% of the time, I double stamp. Now, again, I was showing you, I usually do this, but if you needed a little bit more pressure, or, you know, if your arms or wrists are bothering you, then you can bring in this little pressure tool. Okay, so there is our first impression, which looks really good, but I want a tad more contrast. So again, the benefit of this tool is that as long as your cardstock is in the same spot, everything will line right back up. So your stamps remained in the same position, the cardstock remained in the same position, and now we're all good to go. So I'm going to add just another layer. Okay, and then place that right down. And there we go. Look how nice that looks. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and place this ink to the side. And because I double stamped this, I'm going to set this aside and let it dry really well. Again, this ink does work well with alcohol markers, but you do want to give it time to dry, especially if you do 2 layers of ink like I did. I personally like just to use a mild baby wipe to wash down my stamps. So that is what I do. A smart thing to do though is once you have cleaned off your stamps, be sure just to put them right back on the little stamp sheet, because as you can see, they are clear. And if you lose these in your craft room, trust me when I say that most of the time you can recover them, but it doesn't come without a lot of stress and searching. So as you are creating, just do yourself a little favor and get everything placed back where it goes as you are working. While my ink is drying, I am going to trim down my card base. So the card base is the actual card, okay? The one that folds. So I'm going to use my bigger trimmer again because I'm working with a larger piece of paper, and I like to do top folding cards, which means that they go the long way, which you'll see play out in just a second. But what I'm going to do is, this is 110-pound cardstock. Up until this point, we've worked with 80-pound cardstock, but I like to go heavier for my card base just to make sure it is nice and thick and sturdy. This is 8.5 by 11, so I'm going to trim this right in half, and half of 8.5 is 4 1/4. So I'm going to line that up, press down this little clamp here, and trim. Now I have 2 card bases. So I make cards all the time, so I just save this for the next one. In fact, what I do is I take a bunch of 110-pound cardstock and I just create a bunch of card bases. That way, when I'm creating, I don't have to come and grab this big trimmer and cut them all down. Sometimes I come and just create 50 of these at once really quickly. Just grab 25 pieces of cardstock, trim them all down, get them all ready to go. That way, when it's time to make cards, I can just go quickly with all of my prepped supplies. Now we'll bring in the scoreboard, because this is going to create the little score mark so that we can fold our card. So again, 11 by 4 1/4. So we want to place a score mark right in the middle. So half of 11 is 5 1/2. So I'm going to go ahead, locate 5 1/2 right on here and place a little score mark. Okay, then what I'm going to do is just simply fold. I'll use this same score tool to act as more of a bone folder, and then press that down really, really well. And then I have my top folding A2 size card. Now A2 is the size 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Okay, so again, 110-pound cardstock. It's nice and thick, so it's going to create a very durable card. Now I can just set this to the side because now we need to color our little images. We've given them plenty of time to dry. Okay, here are our stamped images once again. Now I'm going to do Copic alcohol markers. So I have all of my colors here, but just know that down below in the description box, I will place a link to all of the colors that I'm using. That way you don't have to keep pausing the video and writing things down. In addition to everything that I'm using today, you'll see everything listed below. So you'll have everything you need to go down there. All right, the first thing that I'm going to work on are the bubbles. So I'm going to pull 2 colors of blue. I have the B0000, and then I have B00. Okay, so I have those both ready to go. Now the alcohol markers that I have, they have a brush tip and a chisel tip. You can buy replacements for the chisel tip and get a fine detail tip, which is just a really precise skinny tip. I've trained myself just to use the brush tip, just because I knew that if I replaced one tip with a chisel tip, I'd want to do my whole collection and it can get a little pricey. So I went ahead and intentionally trained myself to do the brush tip, and it's been just fine. So one thing you might want to consider when you are starting out with your coloring is just training yourself to do a certain technique or with a certain tip of the marker. Okay, I'm going to go through with my lighter color first. So I'm going to grab that B triple or quadruple 0. That's a lot of zeros, Sarah. And I am going to place all over color. Now, pardon me, I rotate and spin, do all things when I color, but as long as it turns out good, that's what I'm worried about. Okay, so I'm going to add some all over color to my little bubbles here, and you can choose any colors you'd like. I'm just going to choose what kind of fits my style, what makes sense to me. Okay, so do something like that. Okay, And then I'm going to grab my darker color and I'm going to come in and just add some shading. So I'm going to add that just around my bubbles. This is going to add just a little bit of depth and fun. Makes it look realistic. And you can do this in any manner that you wish. Then I'll come back through with my lighter tone. And what I'm doing here is just blending out and creating a little transition or mid-tone between the darker and the lighter. Just like that. Okay, just kind of pushing the darker into the lighter, creating this little mid-tone. And I'm going to stop there. That looks great. Okay, so again, these are the colors and I'll link them down below. So we're done with those two. Now, what I'll do is let's do the tub. Okay, so I'm going to do more of a teal tub. I think that that will be really cute. And I'm going to use the colors BG11 and BG10. Now these are very similar to one another. Whoops, wrong side. And that doesn't help you at all being way up there. Okay. BG11, BG10. I'm going to start with the BG10. And again, I'm going to do all over color on the tub. So I'm just going to go all over. Now, if I get out of the lines, which I'm going to do that intentionally for a second. So I'm going to go, oops. Okay, do you see how I went out of the lines? Don't panic. I'm going to show you a fix for just a, or in just a second. Okay, so all over color with my lighter shade. Okay, just like that. Okay, then I'm going to go in with my darker and just create some shadows. I'm going to go along the bottom of that little lip there, and then I'm going to go along the left and bottom there. Okay, just, you know, do what you want. Make up your rules. I don't really consider like light sources or anything like that. I just have fun. And then just like with the bubbles, I'm going to grab my lighter one once more and just create kind of a mid-tone. Okay, just have fun. And alcohol markers smooth out as they dry. Okay, I'm going to just bump up the shadow just a little bit more. Just a tad. Okay, and sometimes coloring involves just going back and forth, just a little bit. Okay, until you like it. And I like that because it gives, you know, a little bit of depth there. Okay, so I like where that's going. Okay, BG10, BG11, we're gonna put those away. Actually, I'm gonna grab my BG11 real quick and just kind of darken those little feet. Okay, I like that better. Let's move on to the little ducks. So the colors that I pulled for the ducks, I'm going to do just a traditional little yellow ducky. Okay, I'm going to do the YR21 for my darker shade. And then I will do, I will do the Y32 for my lighter. Okay, so starting with my lighter, let me do Daddy Duck so that you can see it on a little bit of a larger scale. And then I'll go through and do the same technique on the little baby ducks. Okay, so all over color with the lighter. With the darker, I'm just going to go through, add some shading right up there, maybe some here, maybe there, and kind of like that. Okay, that makes me happy. Grabbing my lighter shade, just kind of pulling out some of that color. Create the mid-tone, but also just blend that right on out. Okay, and these colors are super similar to one another, so it really takes zero effort for blending, okay? And you can just do as much or as little as you want with the blending. It's up to you. I'm just showing you how I like to color, but you know, go in any direction. Okay, Y32 once more, which is this one for my all over color. And then I'll do the exact same thing with all of the little duckies. So I won't make you watch each and every one, but I'll do one more for you, grabbing my darker to add my shadows. Okay, very subtle. And then just blending that out once more with the lighter of the two yellows. Okay. Okay, so I did my last little ducky. Okay, so let's make sure the right caps go on the right little ducks there. And we'll move on to little feet and beaks. So I have YR02 and then YR00. Okay, once more, grabbing my lighter shade. I'll just add some color there. Okay, and I'm just gonna go through all of these super fast because it is such a small area that usually you want to do your dark and light close to one another, but these are so fast that they're not going to give a ton of time to dry between the two. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to bring in my darker one, and then I probably, maybe I'll just do it really lightly. There's just not a lot of area to really do this, but we'll add a little bit. Okay, more so on Daddy Duck, we have some room to play. So darker, light, once more to blend out. Over, kind of more so on the beak than the feet. Okay, and I like that. All right, so that is what we have for, let me kind of make that look better. That's what we have for our coloring. Okay, so now, actually I'm gonna add some cheeks in a second. Let's do those, but I also wanna talk about fixing mistakes, but also adding some highlights. Okay, so let's add our cheeks first. So I'm just using this R20. I like this for my cheeks. And I'm just going to use the tip of that brush side to add little cheeks to my ducks. And I might actually double that up just to add a little bit more contrast. And then I'll add a big one to Daddy Duck. Just like that. Okay, super, super sweet. Now, if you do get out of the lines, when you do get out of the lines, not if, I like to just use a gel pen. So let's see, this one down here, you can see really well. I just go in and color that away. Just like that. Okay, and that'll dry. I got a little bit more here as well. What size is this? Oh, this is an 8. Okay, this one's brand new. That's why it's kind of not showing up as easy. Okay, now I'm going to go through and just add some highlights. Okay, so I'm going to go on Daddy Duck and just add some simple, it might be a little bit hard for you to see that. These colors I used were light, but respectively totally my style. So I'm just going to add some highlights along these little cutie ducks. Just adds an accent that's fun. And we'll just go on this little belly here. And then along the tub, maybe just go down this side here. Sorry that that's a little hard to see, but, and then we can do a little bit on the bubbles here. Just add some kind of visual interest here. Okay, a little hard to see on camera. In person, it's pretty cute. Okay, add some along the lip of this tub. Okay, now let's do the coordinating dies. So this is where those wire snips are going to be very handy. So I'm going to open this up, pull these out, and as you can see, they're all connected, and we need to find the ones that match the little images that we did. So first and foremost, I can see Daddy Duck. So I'm going to just pinch, and then I kind of just wiggle it away, and it comes right off. Okay. And then you'll want to be mindful just to make sure you don't have any little pokies, because they could cut you. That does not feel good. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure. Also, those pokies can leave little press lines in your paper. So you don't wanna do that either. All right, so there's that. Oops, so we have Daddy, just like that. All right, then I'll just go through and find all of the other little duckies. Okay, so I'm gonna move all those other dies to the side. This is where the washi tape comes in great handy. So now you're just going to position these and line them up, and then tape them down so they don't shift as you are cutting them out. So again, just position these the best that you can, tape them down. And again, this is why you want to leave plenty of room between your stamps so that you have room to cut them out. So make sure you don't place them too close when you are initially stamping them down on your paper. Okay, and last but not least, this little tub, just like that. Okay, now I'm going to use my smaller die cut machine. So what I'm going to do is just trim this down a little bit. That way it fits again through my little smaller one. So I'm going to trim that just like that, and then we'll be able to fit it through on the smaller plates. Okay, so I have my smaller die cut machine, and I purposely want to use this just to show how you can create a card with a small die cut machine as well, since this is a beginner video. Okay, so I have this sandwiched between my two plates, and I'm just gonna roll that right on through to cut out those little pieces with my dies. Okay, and then you just gently pop those out. Again, that washi tape is so low tack that it doesn't rip your paper. So we'll just place our little die cuts, and I will go back through and remove my dies from this paper in a little bit. But then we'll send through our next little set and get these all cut out. And then we have another little ducky. We have our little bubbles. Oh, I love the colors on this. So cute. All right, we're really making progress now. Now, let's go ahead and grab a card panel. And initially, I size all of my card panels to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, which again is that A2 size. I'll just remove this. And what I'm gonna do is bring in my mini trimmer and trim this down a little bit. Okay, so mini trimmer, I use this again 90% of the time. Whenever I'm not doing a card base, I'm using this. Okay, and I'm gonna trim this down to 4 by 5 1/4. Okay, now 4 by 5 1/4 compared to, let me see my card panel here. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That's going to give me 1/4 of an inch margin around my card. It's kind of hard to see white on white, but you'll see it in just a little bit. All right, let's remove this little guy. And then bringing that same panel back in, I want to get an idea for where I want all my little pieces here. So I am going to layer this little guy, and this doesn't need to be perfect. I just need to get a general idea. Okay, we want Daddy Duck probably somewhere here. Actually, I'm gonna do myself a favor. I am going to grab this tape, place it on the back of that. And let's just make this one piece. Okay, I like that. That's one piece at this point. And we'll glue that all together. Let's find our little precision glue. Again, the benefits of having some precision glue, we'll just add a little glue in between. Glue those down. All right, that's gonna make that part a little bit easier. Okay, oops, do I have something on that? Turn it over. Okay, so we have something like this, this, and let's see. Kind of want to have one kind of in the tub. And maybe two around the tub, maybe. We'll do something kind of like that. Okay, so I want to position this just very basically, and we'll get this all perfect in a little while. Okay, so just to kind of give myself a little bit of permanency, I'm going to do that and just kind of tape that down because I want to do my sentiment next. So we're going to bring in that stamp positioner one more time. It's over here. And I want to talk, or I want to not talk, I want to do my sentiment. Okay, and I want to stamp that right on my card panel here. So let's grab those stamps once more and decide on our sentiment. So I like that I'm a lucky duck to have you as my dad. Okay, so I'm going to do these all individually of one another. So I'm a lucky duck is going to go down first. And the reason I wanted this on my panel is because I want to decide, let's see, I'm a lucky duck to have you as my dad. I need to move these up a little bit. This is just going to help me with positioning. So, in fact, if I put that there, I think at this point I kind of know, okay, this is where your tweezers coming in is going to be super helpful. Oops. If I bring that up a little bit, there we go. I think that's gonna be better. Okay, making sure that's still in the corner there. I'm a lucky duck. Now there's lines on your little door here that can help make sure that that sentiment is straight. That looks good. Okay, and then you can kind of make sure when you're using something skinny like this that you don't rub too much because you don't want to accidentally nudge it out of position. So I just kind of lightly tapped on that just to remove that residue. I'm a lucky duck. Okay. And I'm double stamping that because I double stamped my images and I like everything to have the same contrast. Okay, once more, make sure you remove these and put them back. I'm a lucky duck to have you as mine. Now I stamp these separate because then you can see there's like a square around them that has kind of a thick margin and that can deter you from getting them really close together. Okay. And again, that looks pretty straight, hopefully. And we'll stamp that down twice. Sometimes once you get the ink on, you can kind of see if you have it positioned. Oh, that looks good. If you have it positioned good or not. Whereas if it's like crooked or something. Okay. Double stamped. Clean that off. And we'll just add Dad. And this would be kind of cute to put it like that too. I don't think that's quite straight. So let me start that again. Okay. And I'll stamp that last one right on down. Cute. And you can center that if you want. I'm just adding a little fun visual interest there and doing it on a little right justification. Okay, so we are ready to really build this card up. We are at the final stages here. So I'm going to remove this from my MISTI, put this away. I can remove these little elements. And what I think I'll do is, because I like how all of these are positioned, I'm going to keep that tape on there for a bit, and I'm going to add all of my foam squares to the back. So let's first add our panel. So this is the panel. We're going to add it to our card base. So what I like to do is open up my card base. I like to use the magnetics that come with my mat, or I guess they didn't come with my mat. I had to buy them separately from my mat, but I'm going to use those to secure that down. And then I'm going to turn this over and add foam tape to the back. Okay, now I can bring in my little fine detail scissors. And again, they're non-stick, so it makes working with sticky adhesives no big deal at all. Okay. And because this is pretty narrow foam tape, I like to do 4 little strips there. And then, nice and straight, I'll just remove these liners. And that reveals the next side of sticky. It's double-sided, and it will attach it to the card base. Okay. So I like to do a white on white because then it really allows my coloring to just really pop on there. Okay, so now again, I really like the placement of all of that. So what I'm going to do is bring in my foam squares. Again, I have 2 sizes. So I'll just add these all around and really pop this up. This is a great way to add some dimension to your card. So far, it's pretty flat because we have a little dimension with our foam tape that we put on the back of our panel, but let's add some there. But now we're gonna bump up some more and just get some dimension there. Okay, and I have some pieces that I have trimmed down, so I'll add those as well, just to add some more structure here. Okay, and kind of overlapped, so I'm going to turn that off. Okay, and then we'll add just a couple more pieces here. Make sure nothing really falls flat. Okay, now remember, you also have, if you decide to get some, you have that smaller size as well. Okay, once more, we're gonna go through and just remove all the little liners on the back. And I'm gonna keep these taped together until I have this all placed down. Okay, there we go. And we're ready to go. Okay. Now, this is where, if I didn't have a big piece like this, I would bring my tweezers in, and you still can. So this is a good example of how you kind of remove all of your hands from the situation so that you can really get a visual for what your card's gonna look like. Instead of having all your hands in here, it's just sometimes too much. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Place it down. And then I can gently remove the washi tape. And again, because it's so low tack, we don't have to worry about it ripping. You still want to be careful though. Okay, this little guy was barely hanging on. So I'm going to use this little precision tip, kind of just nudge it right under that die cut and make sure that this little guy is glued down and permanent on there. Same with this little duck right up here. Make sure that that's placed down. Very cute. Okay, we're gonna do some final embellishments here, and it's just absolutely appropriate to use those dewdrops that kind of look like bubbles or water. Okay, so let's bring in, once again, this wand has that wax tip and our glue. Now, what I want to do here is I'm going to add this little trio up here, and I'm going to add a little duo down here because I feel like it just kind of ties in the sentiment. And then it's all about just finding the size that you want. Now again, they're going to look a little cloudy right now because the glue underneath is wet, but this is going to dry completely clear. Doesn't that just look like bubbles are coming out of that little tub? But again, just to include the sentiment and make it included in the card, I'm going to do a little duo right below. Okay, just like that. Oh, I love it so much. Okay, this is exactly what I wanted when I purchased this stamp set. It's so cute. All right, the last thing is flipping this all the way over to the other side. I'm going to grab my little personalized stamp. Okay, there we go. And voila. Okay, I hope this was a helpful video for you as a beginner to just get an idea of what supplies you may want to invest in as a beginner card maker. Again, if you're joining me and you are a more seasoned card maker, not necessarily a beginner, hopefully this gave you a little dose of inspiration during the card making process, or hopefully it gave you some ideas of things you do still want to add to your craft room. Give this video a thumbs up if you found this helpful. Again, everything that I used both to build this card and the items I recommend for beginners will be linked down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I can't wait to continue creating cards with you soon.